My name is Camilla, and I am 34 years old. For 8 years, I believed I had found the family I always dreamed of. I married into a big, warm household, and I thought they loved me as much as I loved them. But one phone call changed everything. When my husband and 6 of his relatives disappeared to another country without telling me why, I discovered a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I thought I knew. Before I share this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio as an only child. My parents were hardworking people who taught me the value of every dollar and every relationship. They ran a small hardware store together, and I spent my childhood watching them build something from nothing. I learned early that security comes from your own 2 hands, and that family is the most precious thing in the world. When I was 22 years old, my world collapsed. My parents were driving home from a supplier meeting when a truck ran a red light. They died instantly. In one moment, I went from being someone's daughter to being completely alone in this world. No siblings, no grandparents, no aunts or uncles. Just me standing at a double funeral, wondering how I was supposed to keep breathing. I threw myself into work and school. I had been studying accounting at a community college, working part-time at a retail store. After my parents passed, I sold the hardware store, used the money to finish my degree, and push myself harder than I ever had before. I graduated with honors. I got my CPA certification. I landed a job at a real estate development company in Denver, Colorado, and I worked my way up to senior accountant within 4 years. But no matter how successful I became professionally, there was always an emptiness inside me. I missed having family dinners. I missed holiday gatherings. I missed having people who would call just to check on me. I built a good life, but it was a lonely one. That is why, when I met Marcus Thompson at a financial planning seminar 9 years ago, I felt like the universe was finally giving me a second chance at having a family. Marcus was charming in a way that felt genuine. He was not flashy or trying too hard. He was a sales manager at a car dealership, and he had this warm smile that made me feel seen. On our first date, he asked about my parents, and when I told him the story, he held my hand across the table and said something I will never forget. He said that I would never have to be alone again because his family would become my family. I should have known that promises made over candlelight rarely survive the harsh light of day. Marcus came from a big family. His mother, Patricia, was a retired elementary school teacher who seemed to have an opinion about everything. His father, Ronald, was a quiet man who worked in construction most of his life. Marcus had a younger brother named Derek, who was 26 at the time and worked odd jobs while figuring out his life. His younger sister, Stacy, was 24 and dreaming of opening her own nail salon someday. Then there were 2 cousins, Brianna and Tiffany, who were practically raised like siblings after their parents moved overseas for work. They were both in college, struggling to pay tuition. The first time Marcus brought me to a family dinner, I was nervous beyond words. But Patricia hugged me at the door and said she was so happy Marcus had found someone special. Derek made jokes that put me at ease. Stacy complimented my outfit and asked where I got my earrings. Brianna and Tiffany peppered me with questions about my job, like I was the most interesting person they had ever met. I fell in love not just with Marcus, but with the idea of belonging to this big, loud, loving family. We got married after a year of dating. It was a small ceremony in Patricia and Ronald's backyard. I wore my mother's pearl earrings, the only piece of jewelry I kept from my childhood home. I remember looking at my new family during the reception, watching them laugh and dance, and feeling like I had finally found where I belonged. For our future, I used my savings to put a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs of Denver. I had saved over $60,000 by that point, and I put $40,000 toward the house. Marcus contributed $10,000. I suggested we put both our names on the deed because that is what married couples do. That is what trust looks like. For the next 8 years, I paid 70% of the mortgage because my salary was higher and more stable than Marcus's commission-based income. I never complained. I never kept score. I thought that was what marriage meant. I also became the unofficial bank for the Thompson family. When Patricia needed $15,000 to renovate her kitchen after a pipe burst, I wrote the check without hesitation. She promised to pay it back when she could. When Derek racked up $12,000 in credit card debt from what he called bad investments, I helped him pay it off so it would not destroy his credit score. He said he would return it as soon as he got back on his feet. When Stacy wanted to open her nail salon, I gave her $18,000 as startup capital. She cried and called me the best sister she never had. When Brianna and Tiffany could not afford their tuition payments, I covered $20,000 each over several semesters, telling them education was the most important investment. In total, over 8 years, I gave the Thompson family $85,000. I kept records of everything because that is what accountants do. But I never once asked for repayment because I thought we were family. I thought the love and acceptance I received was worth more than any amount of money. I was a fool. The first cracks in my perfect life appeared about 2 years before everything fell apart, but I was too busy wanting to believe in my fairy tale to see them clearly. Marcus started coming home later from work. At first, it was once or twice a week. He would text me saying there was a staff meeting or a difficult customer who needed extra attention. Then it became 3 or 4 times a week. Then it was almost every night. I would have dinner ready and it would grow cold on the table while I waited. When I asked about it, he snapped at me. He told me I was being paranoid and controlling. He said the car business was competitive and he needed to put in extra hours to stay on top. He accused me of not supporting his career. I apologized. I actually apologized for caring where my husband was. His phone habits changed too. He used to leave his phone on the kitchen counter while we watched television together. Now it was always in his pocket, face down, with new passwords I did not know. If it buzzed during dinner, he would glance at it and quickly flip it over. If I walked into a room while he was texting, he would close the screen immediately. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that after 8 years of marriage, I should trust my husband more than my own instincts. But then I started noticing changes in the family dynamics too. Patricia, who used to call me every Sunday without fail, started letting weeks go by without reaching out. When I called her, our conversations felt rushed, like she was eager to get off the phone. She stopped inviting me to help plan family events, even though I had been her go-to-helper for years. At family gatherings, I began to notice whispered conversations that would abruptly stop when I walked into the room. Stacy, who used to text me funny memes every day, became distant and formal. Her responses went from paragraphs of excitement to single words like, okay and sure and thanks. One Sunday dinner at Patricia's house, I excused myself to use the bathroom. On my way back, I passed by the kitchen and heard my name. I stopped just outside the doorway hidden from view and listened. Stacy was talking to Brianna. She said something about how they needed to be more careful around me, that I was starting to notice things. Brianna laughed and said I was too trusting to figure anything out. My heart stopped. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Then I walked back to the dining room with a smile on my face, pretending I had heard nothing. That night, I could not sleep. I lay next to Marcus, listening to him breathe, and wondered who I was really sharing my bed with. A few weeks later, I got my first concrete piece of evidence. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch after a long day. His phone was on the coffee table, and I was cleaning up the living room. I was not planning to snoop. I really was not. But then his phone screen lit up with a notification, and I could not help but glance at it. The message was from someone named Jenna. It said, and I remember the exact words because they are burned into my memory, "Miss you so much. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." My hands started shaking. I wanted to grab the phone and read everything. I wanted to wake Marcus up and demand answers. But something stopped me. Some instinct told me that if I confronted him now without more information, he would find a way to turn it around on me. He would call me crazy. He would make me the villain. So I did something I never thought I would do. I decided to become a detective in my own marriage. The next morning, while Marcus was in the shower, I logged into our shared bank account on my laptop. We had a joint checking account and a joint savings account. I had always managed our finances, so I knew every transaction that should be there. What I found made me sick. There were hundreds of charges I did not recognize. Expensive restaurants I had never been to. A jewelry store where I had never received any jewelry. Hotel rooms on nights Marcus told me he was working late. Spa treatments. Designer handbags. Plane tickets for short trips on weekends. He said he was golfing with colleagues. I added it all up. Over the past 18 months, Marcus had spent nearly $30,000 on things that had nothing to do with me. I closed the laptop and went to the bathroom. I threw up. Then I washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a decision. I would not confront Marcus. Not yet. First, I needed to know exactly who Jenna was and how deep this betrayal went. And that is when I decided to hire a professional. I found Mr. Henderson through a referral from a colleague who had gone through a difficult divorce. He was a private investigator in his 50s, calm and professional with the kind of face that did not judge. I met him at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere Marcus or his family might see me. I told him everything. The late nights, the phone secrecy, the message from Jenna, the mysterious charges. He listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes in a small leather notebook. When I finished, he looked at me with kind eyes and said he had seen this pattern hundreds of times. He told me the truth was usually worse than what wives imagined, but that knowing the truth was always better than living a lie. I hired him on the spot. For 3 weeks, Mr. Henderson followed Marcus. He photographed him leaving work. He tracked his movements on weekends. He documented every meeting, every dinner, every hotel visit. The day I received his report, I took the afternoon off work. I went home, locked myself in my home office, and opened the envelope with shaking hands. The woman's name was Jenna Collins. She was 28 years old, a receptionist at the same car dealership where Marcus worked. According to Mr. Henderson's research, she had started working there about 2.5 years ago. The affair began almost immediately. There were photographs. Marcus and Jenna holding hands at a restaurant. Marcus and Jenna kissing in a parking lot. Marcus and Jenna walking into a hotel together. In some photos, Jenna was visibly pregnant. The report stated that Jenna was approximately 7 months pregnant with Marcus's child. I read that sentence 3 times before it sank in. My husband was having a baby with another woman. I set the report down and stared at the wall for I do not know how long. An hour, maybe more. My brain could not process what I was seeing. This was not supposed to happen to me. I had done everything right. I had been a good wife. I had taken care of his family. I had sacrificed and saved and loved with everything I had, and this was what I got in return. But the report contained something even more devastating. Mr. Henderson had followed Marcus to his mother's house one evening. Through the window, he photographed Marcus, Jenna, and Patricia, sitting at the dinner table together, laughing like old friends. In another photo, Stacy and Jenna were shopping at a baby store, holding up tiny outfits and smiling. There were screenshots from Instagram. Jenna had a private account, but Mr. Henderson had ways of accessing information. In the screenshots, I saw photos of Jenna with Brianna and Tiffany at a brunch, all of them making peace signs at the camera. There was a photo of Jenna at what looked like a family barbecue in Patricia's backyard, the same backyard where I got married. Derek was in several photos too, according to Mr. Henderson's notes. Derek had helped Marcus find and rent an apartment for Jenna about 8 months ago. The apartment was in a nice part of town, and Marcus was paying the rent. With my money. With our money. With the money I earned while believing I was building a future with this man. Everyone knew. Every single member of the Thompson family had welcomed Jenna into their lives while continuing to smile at me across dinner tables. They had accepted gifts from me, borrowed money from me, eaten food I cooked in my home, and the whole time they knew my husband was building a separate family behind my back. I thought about all those moments when conversations stopped when I entered rooms. I thought about the distance that had grown between me and Stacy, between me and Patricia. I thought about how they unfollowed me on social media. It all made sense now. They were not just keeping a secret. They were actively choosing sides. and they had chosen the other woman. I cried that night. I cried until I had no tears left. I cried for the family I thought I had found. I cried for the 8 years I had invested in people who never truly loved me. I cried for the naive young woman who had been so desperate for belonging that she missed every red flag. But when morning came, I wiped my face and made a decision. If they could betray me with such coordinated precision, I could respond with equal calculation. I called a divorce attorney named Ms. Thornton. She came highly recommended for complex financial cases involving infidelity. During our first meeting, I laid everything out. The house I had mostly paid for, the bank accounts I had funded, the money I had lent to family members, the evidence of the affair. Ms. Thornton looked at me with something like respect in her eyes. She said most women in my position came to her in a state of emotional devastation, unable to think clearly. But I had documents. I had records. I had evidence. She told me we needed to be strategic. We needed to protect my assets before Marcus knew what was coming. We needed to gather more evidence, and most importantly, we needed to wait for the right moment to strike. I asked her when that moment would be. She smiled and said I would know when it came. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. I smiled at Marcus over breakfast. I attended family dinners and hugged Patricia and laughed at Derek's jokes. I played the role of the happy, oblivious wife. While inside, I was documenting everything, preparing everything, waiting for my moment. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. The moment came on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Marcus came home from work with an unusual energy about him. He was almost cheerful, which had become rare in our house. He told me over dinner that he had an incredible opportunity. A business contact in Vancouver, Canada wanted to meet with him about a potential partnership. It would require him to be there for 2 to 3 weeks, but it could change his career. I nodded and asked questions. What kind of partnership? Who was the contact? Where would he stay? He answered vaguely. He said it was complicated to explain, but that I should trust him. Trust. The word almost made me laugh out loud. I told him it sounded exciting and that I supported him. He seemed relieved, like he had expected me to put up more of a fight. After he went to bed, I called Mr. Henderson. I asked him to find out what was really happening in Vancouver. 3 days later, I had my answer. Marcus was not going to Vancouver for business. He was going because Jenna wanted to give birth in Canada. Apparently, she had some romantic notion about her child having Canadian citizenship, about starting fresh in a new country, away from any complications. And Marcus, desperate to please his pregnant mistress, had agreed to make it happen. But here was the part that truly broke my heart. He was not going alone. The entire Thompson family was going with him. Patricia and Ronald, Derek, Stacy, Brianna, and Tiffany. All 6 of them had booked flights to Vancouver to be present for the birth of Jenna's baby. They had rented a large Airbnb house where they would all stay together for nearly 3 weeks, playing happy family while I sat alone in the house I paid for. I remember exactly where I was standing when Mr. Henderson told me this. I was in my kitchen looking out at the backyard where Marcus and I had once talked about putting in a swimming pool for the children we planned to have. Children that never came because Marcus was always too busy. Now I knew what he had been busy with. 7 people. My husband and 6 of his relatives, all united in their support of the woman who had stolen my life. Not one of them thought to invite me. Not one of them felt guilty enough to tell me the truth. They were leaving me alone without a second thought. Marcus left on a Friday morning. He kissed my cheek at the door and told me he would call when he landed. I smiled and wished him a safe trip. Inside, I was counting down the minutes. That first night alone, I sat in our empty living room and let myself feel everything. The anger, the humiliation, the grief. I cried so hard that my chest hurt. I screamed into a pillow until my throat was raw. I let 8 years of suppressed suspicions and ignored instincts come flooding out. At 3 a.m, I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen. My face was blotchy. I looked like a woman who had been destroyed. But when I looked deeper, I saw something else. I saw a woman who had survived losing her parents at 22, a woman who had built a career from nothing, a woman who had enough financial knowledge to outmaneuver anyone who underestimated her. They thought I was too trusting to figure things out. Brianna had said so herself. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Monday morning, I called Miss Thornton and told her it was time. We moved with precision and speed. Every action had been planned for months, and now we executed the plan flawlessly. First, the bank accounts. As a joint account holder, I had every legal right to freeze our shared accounts. I went to the bank, personally met with a manager, and explained that I suspected fraudulent activity and wanted to protect the assets until a formal investigation could be completed. The manager, a sympathetic woman who seemed to understand more than I was saying, processed my request immediately. Within an hour, our joint savings account, which held $123,000, was frozen. No withdrawals, no transfers, no access. I also canceled the secondary credit cards linked to our accounts. These were cards that Marcus had issued to himself, and I later discovered to Jenna. Somewhere in Vancouver, credit cards were suddenly being declined, and nobody knew why. Next, the house. Ms. Thornton filed for divorce that same day. In the filing, we included a motion for exclusive possession of the marital home, citing evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct. We also requested a temporary restraining order preventing Marcus from selling, transferring, or encumbering any marital property. The judge, after reviewing our evidence, granted the orders within 48 hours. Legally, Marcus could not touch the house, could not sell it, could not even enter it without my permission during the divorce proceedings. I hired a locksmith to change every lock on every door. I installed a new security system with cameras and alerts. The house that I had paid for was now my fortress. Then came the letters. Working with Ms. Thornton, I drafted formal demand letters to every member of the Thompson family who owed me money. Patricia owed $15,000, and Derek owed $12,000. Stacy owed $18,000. Brianna and Tiffany each owed $20,000. The letters were professional and cold. They stated the amounts owed, referenced the original agreements, and demanded full repayment within 30 days. Failure to comply would result in legal action to recover the debts, plus interest and legal fees. The letters were sent via certified mail to their home addresses in Denver. They would be waiting for them when they returned from their little family vacation. Finally, I addressed the workplace situation. I did not do anything dramatic or unprofessional. I simply requested a meeting with the general manager of the car dealership, where Marcus and Jenna worked. I presented the evidence of their relationship, including photos and documentation of Marcus using work hours for personal affairs. I also showed evidence that Jenna had received gifts and payments from Marcus that may have been intended as workplace favors. I made no demands. I filed no formal complaints. I simply provided information and let the management draw their own conclusions. Within a week, I received word through Mr. Henderson that both Marcus and Jenna had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. By the time Friday arrived, exactly 1 week after Marcus had left for Vancouver, I had frozen their money, secured my home, sent legal demands to every family member who had betrayed me, and put both Marcus and Jenna's careers in jeopardy. I sat in my living room that evening with a glass of wine, the first I had allowed myself in months. I did not feel happy exactly. Happiness was not possible with so much pain still fresh, but I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt powerful. The first phone call came on day 5 after I froze the accounts. My phone rang at 7 a.m. Denver time, which meant it was 6 a.m. in Vancouver. I looked at the screen. It was Marcus. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I wanted him to wonder if I would pick up at all. His voice was different from anything I had heard before. Gone was the charming, confident man I had married. In his place was someone panicked, confused, and angry all at once. He demanded to know what was happening. He said his credit cards were not working. He said he could not access the bank account. He said he was stranded in another country without money. I listened to him rant for about a minute. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I spoke. I told him that if he had questions about our finances, he should ask his other family. Then I hung up. He called back immediately. I declined. He called again. I declined. He kept calling, and I kept declining until finally I blocked his number. Over the next few days, I received calls from every single Thompson family member. Patricia called crying, saying she did not understand what was happening. Derek called demanding an explanation, his voice loud and aggressive. Stacy called begging, saying she knew things looked bad, but I had to understand. Brianna and Tiffany called together, their voices overlapping with excuses and pleas. I blocked them all. Mr. Henderson kept me updated on what was happening in Vancouver. Without access to money, the Thompson family was falling apart. The Airbnb host demanded payment for the second week of their stay, and when they could not pay, they were asked to leave. They tried to find a cheaper place to stay, but had no working credit cards and limited cash. Derek sold his expensive watch, a gift Marcus had given him for his 30th birthday, to a pawn shop for a fraction of its value. Patricia called every friend and distant relative she could think of, begging for wire transfers. Jenna went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected. She gave birth in a public hospital rather than the private birthing center they had planned. There were no complications, but the experience was far from the luxurious welcome they had envisioned for the baby. After nearly 10 days of scrambling, borrowing, and selling possessions, the Thompson family scraped together enough money for cheap flights back to Denver. They arrived on a Wednesday evening, exhausted, humiliated, and desperate. Marcus came straight to our house. I watched through the security camera as he walked up to the front door, put his key in the lock, and discovered it did not work. He tried again, then again. Then he started pounding on the door, shouting my name. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the court orders. I showed them the restraining order. I showed them documentation proving that this was my home and that Marcus had no legal right to enter. The officers explained the situation to Marcus. They told him he needed to leave or he would be arrested for trespassing. I watched through the window as my husband, the man I had loved for 9 years, was escorted off the property of the house that his wife had paid for. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, staring at the house. I wonder what he was thinking. Maybe he was remembering all the times I had welcomed his family here, cooked for them, opened my home and my heart to them. Maybe he was calculating how badly he had miscalculated. Eventually, he walked away. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The dealership completed their investigation and terminated both Marcus and Jenna for violation of workplace conduct policies. Marcus tried to fight the termination, but he had no leverage and no resources for legal action. Patricia received my demand letter and had a breakdown. She could not afford to pay $15,000. To meet the demand and avoid a lawsuit, she was forced to sell her house and downsize to a small apartment. Derek, already financially unstable, had no way to pay $12,000. I filed a civil suit and his wages were eventually garnished. Stacy's nail salon, which she had opened with my money, was failing anyway. When faced with my demand letter, she had to close the business and declare personal bankruptcy. Brianna and Tiffany, still young and just starting their careers, were devastated to receive legal demands for $40,000 combined. They set up payment plans that would take years to complete. Marcus moved in with Jenna and the baby, but without jobs, they could not afford the nice apartment they had been renting. They moved from place to place, staying with friends, then acquaintances, then people they barely knew. The last I heard, they were living in a small studio apartment on the bad side of town, both working minimum wage jobs. The divorce was finalized 4 months after it was filed. The judge, after reviewing the evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, awarded me 75% of the marital assets, including full ownership of the house. Marcus was ordered to pay a portion of his future earnings as compensation for the funds he had misappropriated during the marriage. He will be paying me for years. The first few months after everything was settled were the hardest of my life. I had won. By every objective measure, I had emerged victorious from this battlefield. I had protected my assets, recovered my money, and ensured that the people who betrayed me faced consequences for their actions. Justice had been served, but victory felt hollow. I would come home to my beautiful house, the house I had fought so hard to keep, and sit in the empty living room listening to the silence. There was no one to cook dinner for. No family gatherings to plan, no Sunday phone calls from Patricia, no text messages from Stacy. The loneliness I had tried to escape by marrying into the Thompson family came rushing back more intense than ever. I had thought I found a cure for my isolation. Instead, I had just delayed the inevitable while adding a devastating heartbreak on top. For the first few weeks, I barely functioned. I went to work because I had to. I ate because my body required it, but I felt like a ghost moving through my own life, present but not really there. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Ramirez. She was a gentle woman in her 60s who specialized in trauma and betrayal. In our sessions, I talked about things I had never told anyone. I talked about losing my parents. I talked about the desperation I felt to belong somewhere. I talked about how I had ignored every warning sign because I wanted so badly to believe I had found a family. Dr. Ramirez helped me understand that my vulnerability was not a weakness. She said my capacity for love and trust was a beautiful thing that had been exploited by people who did not deserve it. The problem was not that I was too trusting. The problem was that I gave my trust to the wrong people. She also helped me see something I had missed for years. In my rush to become part of the Thompson family, I had abandoned myself. I had stopped doing things I enjoyed. I had lost touch with friends. I had made my entire identity about being a good wife and a good daughter-in-law and a good sister-in-law. Who was Camilla outside of those roles, I did not know anymore. So I started to find out. I reconnected with Linda, my best friend from college. We had drifted apart after I got married because I was always too busy with Thompson family obligations to maintain our friendship. But Linda was gracious and forgiving. She told me she had been worried about me for years, that she had noticed me disappearing into that family, but she did not know how to say anything. We started meeting for coffee every Saturday morning. We talked about everything except my divorce at first. We talked about books and movies and travel and dreams. Slowly, I started to remember who I was before I became Mrs. Thompson. I took up running again, something I had loved in my 20s, but abandoned because Marcus thought it was boring. Every morning, I ran 3 miles through my neighborhood, watching the sun rise, feeling my body grow stronger. I adopted a cat named Oliver. He was a gray tabby who had been at the shelter for months because he was shy and older and not as cute as the kittens. But when I sat in his enclosure, he climbed into my lap and purred, and I knew we were meant to find each other. 2 lonely souls learning to trust again. I also did something terrifying. I started going to social events by myself, networking dinners, art gallery openings, book clubs. At first I felt awkward and out of place, but gradually I made new friends, people who knew nothing about my past, people who liked me for who I was not, for what I could give them. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, my company promoted me to Chief Financial Officer. It was a position I had been working toward my entire career, and I finally had the mental and emotional energy to seize it. At the celebration dinner, I looked around at my colleagues and new friends, and I realized something surprising. I was happy. Not in the naive, desperate way I had been happy when I first met Marcus. This was a different kind of happiness. It was quieter, more sustainable. It was based on my own accomplishments and my own relationships and my own sense of self-worth. No one could take it away from me because it came from inside me. I sold the big house eventually. It had too many memories, too many ghosts. I bought a smaller condo downtown with a balcony overlooking the city. Every morning I drink my coffee and watch the sunrise and feel grateful for the life I have built. Do I still feel pain sometimes? Of course. Betrayal leaves scars that never fully heal. There are moments when I see a big, happy family at a restaurant and feel a pang of longing for what I thought I had. There are nights when the loneliness creeps in, and I wonder if I will ever fully trust someone again. But here is what I have learned. You cannot buy love. You cannot earn belonging. You cannot sacrifice yourself into being accepted by people who do not truly see your worth. Real family, real love, real connection. These things are freely given and freely received. They do not come with a price tag or an invoice. I spent 8 years and $85,000 trying to purchase a place in a family that never wanted me. They took my money, my time, my energy, and my heart. And when someone younger and more convenient came along, they discarded me without a second thought. But they underestimated me. They thought I was just the quiet wife, the reliable source of funds, the woman too trusting to fight back. They were wrong. I am stronger than they ever imagined, and I am at peace. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. It is never too late to stand up for yourself. It is never too late to walk away from people who do not value you. It is never too late to start over and build a life that truly belongs to you. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to fight for yourself when everyone around you thought you would not? Have you ever turned your pain into power? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button so more people can find it. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because I share stories like this every week. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of a community that supports and uplifts each other. Remember, no matter what you are going through right now, you have more strength than you know. Trust yourself. Protect yourself, and never let anyone make you feel like you are worth less than you are. Until next time, take care of your heart. It is the only one you have got.